The automatic doors of Mercy General Hospital slid open with a sharp hiss, swallowing people into a world filled with flashing lights, hurried footsteps, and the constant chorus of monitors. Rain hammered against the glass entrance as paramedics rushed a young woman through the emergency room on a stretcher. Her clothes were soaked, her face pale, and an oxygen mask covered most of her features. Nurses moved alongside the gurney, calling out vital signs while doctors prepared a trauma bay. Inside the emergency department, every second seemed louder than the last. Phones rang endlessly. Families waited anxiously in crowded chairs. Stretchers lined the hallways as medical staff hurried from one patient to another. Near the reception desk stood Daniel Carter, holding the hand of his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. She winced every time she put weight on her right ankle after slipping at a neighborhood playground. Daniel had tried to reassure her during the drive to the hospital, promising it was probably just a sprain. Even now, despite the chaos around them, he knelt beside her with a calm smile. "Does it still hurt?" "A little," Lily whispered. "We'll get it checked out soon." She nodded and leaned against him, clutching the small stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere. The waiting room television played muted news while rainwater dripped from umbrellas gathered near the entrance. Daniel glanced toward the treatment area as voices suddenly rose. "We're losing pressure. Get another line in. Call surgery." The words echoed through the partially open doors. Several staff members hurried past without slowing down. Whatever was happening behind those doors had everyone's attention. Daniel instinctively looked up. Years ago, before becoming a full-time father, he had worked in high-pressure emergency environments. Those experiences had taught him to recognize the rhythm of organized urgency. This sounded different. Something wasn't going according to plan. He quickly looked back at Lily. "You stay right here with Mr. Rabbit, okay? I'm not going anywhere." He smiled. A nurse approached them with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry for the delay. We've had a major trauma come in." "It's okay," Daniel replied politely. As she hurried away, another burst of activity came from the trauma bay. Equipment rolled across the floor. Someone called for additional imaging. Another physician arrived almost at a run. Daniel didn't move closer. He respected hospital staff too much to interfere. Instead, he remained where he was, quietly observing from a distance while keeping one eye on Lily. Through the open doorway he caught only brief glimpses of the room. Doctors surrounded the patient. Nurses adjusted monitors. Another clinician reviewed images on a nearby screen. The atmosphere felt tense. Minutes stretched on. The hallway seemed to hold its breath. Family members whispered prayers. Children grew unusually quiet. Even people who had arrived with far less serious injuries sensed that something extraordinary was unfolding only a few doors away. Inside the trauma room, discussions became more urgent. One doctor studied the monitor before exchanging concerned looks with another. A nurse handed over fresh supplies. Someone shook their head. Daniel folded his arms. He wasn't trying to judge anyone's decisions. Medicine was complex, and every patient was different. Still, something about the pattern of movement inside the room caught his attention. He watched carefully, saying nothing. Lily tugged gently on his sleeve. "Dad?" "Yes?" "Are they going to be okay?" Daniel looked toward the busy trauma bay before answering. "I hope so." His voice carried quiet sincerity. The child nodded, accepting the answer. Around them, the emergency department continued moving like a machine that never stopped. More patients arrived. More stretchers rolled through the doors. Phones continued ringing. Rain continued falling outside. Yet all eyes seemed drawn toward the single room where dozens of professionals were fighting to save one life. Daniel took a slow breath. He reminded himself that he was simply another visitor in the hospital. The doctors inside were highly trained professionals doing everything they could. Whatever happened next would belong to them. For now, he stayed exactly where he was, beside his daughter, watching silently as the night grew longer and the tension inside the emergency room continued to rise. Daniel remained seated beside Lily, gently adjusting the ice pack around her ankle while the emergency department carried on in a blur of movement. The tension from the trauma bay seemed to spread through the entire floor. Staff members hurried from one room to another, exchanging brief conversations that disappeared beneath the chorus of alarms and footsteps. Every few minutes another physician entered the treatment room, while others emerged only long enough to review charts before rushing back inside. Lily looked up at her father. "Dad, they're still helping her." "They are," Daniel answered softly. "Everyone in there is doing everything they can." She nodded and hugged her stuffed rabbit closer. A nearby family whispered to one another, wondering what had happened. Nobody seemed to know much beyond the fact that a critically injured young woman had arrived by ambulance less than an hour earlier. The uncertainty made the waiting room unusually quiet. Even strangers found themselves hoping for good news. Daniel's attention drifted toward the trauma bay once more. Through the partly open doorway he noticed medical staff studying monitors and discussing options in calm but urgent voices. He couldn't hear every word, nor could he see everything happening inside. He reminded himself that emergency medicine required teamwork, careful assessment, and information unavailable to anyone standing outside the room. A nurse walked briskly past carrying additional supplies. Another doctor arrived after being paged. The atmosphere remained intense. Daniel looked away. He had learned long ago that watching from a distance never revealed the full picture. Hospitals were places where difficult decisions happened every minute, often based on details invisible to everyone else. Moments later, the same nurse returned toward the waiting area. She paused near Daniel and Lily. "I'm sorry for the wait," she said. "We're doing our best to see everyone as quickly as possible." Daniel smiled politely. "No worries. We understand." She thanked him before disappearing once again through the swinging doors. Lily leaned against her father. "Can I have some water?" "Of course." Daniel stood, purchased a bottle from a nearby vending machine, and returned to his seat. As he handed it to her, another burst of activity echoed from the treatment area. Several staff members moved quickly between rooms, coordinating equipment and communicating with one another. Although the pace increased, their actions remained organized and professional. Daniel quietly admired their focus. He knew firsthand how exhausting emergencies could become, especially when multiple patients required immediate attention. The waiting room clock continued ticking. Nearly an hour had passed since they first arrived. Finally, a physician entered the waiting area carrying a tablet. He called another patient's name before disappearing again. Life inside the hospital never slowed. Lily rested her head against Daniel's shoulder. "I'm sleepy." "I know. Will we be here much longer?" "I don't think too much longer." She closed her eyes for a moment. Daniel gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Across the room, a television displayed weather updates showing the heavy storm moving across the city. More ambulances were expected to arrive as roads remained slick and dangerous. The automatic doors opened again. Paramedics wheeled in another patient while staff immediately directed them toward an available treatment room. The emergency department adjusted seamlessly, expanding and contracting around every new arrival. Daniel couldn't help appreciating the coordination. Every nurse seemed to know exactly where to go. Every physician communicated clearly. Every technician focused on a specific responsibility. No one wasted movement. No one panicked. Even under pressure, the hospital functioned through teamwork. After another several minutes, the physician treating Lily approached with a friendly smile. "Mr. Carter?" Daniel stood. "We've reviewed your daughter's X-rays." Lily looked nervous. "Is it broken?" The physician smiled reassuringly. "No. The images don't show a fracture. It appears to be a sprain, which is good news." Relief washed across Daniel's face. "Thank you. We'll wrap the ankle, give you instructions for home care, and she should be feeling much better with rest over the next several days." Lily smiled for the first time that evening. "I told you I'd be okay," she whispered proudly. Daniel laughed softly. "You certainly did." As the physician finished explaining the recovery plan, voices from the trauma area became calmer. Staff members continued working, but the earlier sense of urgency had eased. Daniel noticed several clinicians stepping out briefly to document notes before returning inside. He didn't know the outcome for the critically injured patient, nor did he assume anything about her condition. What he did know was that the doctors and nurses had never stopped working together through one of the busiest nights imaginable. While Lily's ankle was wrapped, Daniel quietly offered a few words of appreciation to the nurse who had cared for them. "Thank you for everything you've done tonight." She smiled, looking tired but grateful. "You're very welcome. It's always nice to hear that." Daniel helped Lily stand carefully. She tested her foot and managed a small step. "It still hurts." "It probably will for a few days," Daniel said gently. "We'll take it easy." Together they walked slowly toward the hospital exit. Outside, the rain had almost stopped. The storm clouds were beginning to break apart, and the first hint of dawn appeared on the horizon. Daniel looked back once at the glowing emergency department before opening the car door for Lily. The hospital continued its work behind those walls, filled with people who would keep caring for complete strangers long after the sun rose. Without another word, father and daughter drove quietly into the early morning, grateful that one small part of a difficult night had ended with hope.